Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Peya, Pedig Zayin, Halacha Zayin, and God willing, starting the final chapter, Pedig Ches, Halacha Aleph. We will be learning Daf Samach Zayin. We left off on Daf Samach Zayin, Amud Aleph, 5 lines from the top of the Amud by the dot, Rab Ze'eda B'Shem Rab Yechanan. Let's quickly review. When a person consecrates a field, a sada, a kedem, and a sada, but we're speaking about a vineyard that belongs to Hegdish, is exempt from Arla, is exempt from Revoi, is exempt from the oilerless. However, we concluded by quoting a Braisa that nonetheless, that Kedem is still bound by the laws of Shemitah. Now, let's just clarify. It happens to be by Hashgacha Pratas, we're learning this in Eir, Tavshem Peidala. This Parshas Hashavua is Parshas Bahar, that produce of Shemitah are not intrinsically prohibited. Actually, we can eat, we can drink, we can anoint, we can use them to fuel, but we cannot use them for any other purpose. You can't use it for dyeing. And what we're going to focus on today is that peiros of Shemitah may not be used for schoira, can't make business with them. Now, it doesn't just mean you can't do business with them, but actually what it means is that if I have produce of Shemitah and I sold it, which I am allowed to sell it, not business means that the money, the proceeds that I get from the peiros shvius, the peiros shvius is still Shemitah produce. The money also can only be used for food and drink. The money may not be used for anything else, not even to the fulfillment of a mitzvah. And that rule, it's this detail of how we apply the prohibition of doing schoira b'peiros shvius is going to pose a big challenge initially on this rule that we just said, that a kedem of Hegdish, even though it's exempt, like we mentioned, from Arla, from Revoi, from oilerless, from Peret, but it's not exempt from Shemitah. That will pose a big challenge. There will be a phenomenal back and forth. Included in this sugya, we're going to go back to a Mishnah we had in the Dorim that we quoted a while back in Daf Mem Gimel in the Babel, in where we're speaking about someone who made a vow that no one or his chaver may not have benefit from any of his possessions. So Reuven makes an eder, you Shimon may mudar hana from everything that I own. They're both together in the desert. Reuven has food, Reuven has drink. Shimon will die if he won't be able to partake of it. So there's a machlokes over there in the Mishnah between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yossi, whether there is an option for Reuven to place his drink, his food on a stone, and to declare this is hefker. And now that it's already hefker, Shimon can take it from hefker. We're going to have a certain added qualification, bishitas Rabbi Yossi, from the great Rabbi Yechanan that we did not yet learn. We're going to continue on Daf Samach Zayin to go back to Mishnah Zayin that we had on Daf Samach Vav. When we spoke about Hamagdashas Karmoi, we did mention that if prior to the act of being Magdashas Kedem, the oilerless were already discernible, then they belong to the Aniyim. That's L'Kula Alma. Question is whether the Aniyim, whether they have to give money to the Hegdish for the fact that their little oilerless stayed on the field, they grew, and the Tanakama holds, nevertheless, and Rabbi Yossi holds, yes, that the Aniyim have to pay for the money that they benefited from the Kedem by the fact that those oilerless grew. And we're going to learn in the Gemara that we paskin like the Tana Rabbi Yossi. We're going to move on to the final part of the Mishnah, Mishnah Zayin, and that is Shikha. The Mishnah differentiated Shikha by Kedem, whether we're speaking about trellised vines, whether we're speaking about the rugliyos, vines that are laying on the ground. And we're going to have in our Gemara and machlokes between Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Oishia how to understand this final part of the Mishnah, and we will thus conclude Pedig Shvi. God willing, we're going to start the 8th chapter, the final chapter of Peah. This Mishnah is going to write the great rule that once the field has been thoroughly explored by the Aniyim, all of the matnas aniyim, if they remain, if there is any remainder matnas aniyim, they may be taken by all. How does that work? We'll see. Like God gave it to the aniyim. We'll define the thoroughly explored. We'll see that different types of fields have a different application of this thoroughly explored. And without any further ado, Chavre, again, we're going to the Samach Zayin, Amud Aleph, 5 lines from the top. So we just quoted Kahadod the Tani, we just quoted the Braisa, that if you plant a vineyard, look at that divine providence. We have Shira wines with us. If we plant a kedem for Hegdish, clear, it's potter from Arla, it's potter from Revoi, it's potter from Eilolis, aber it's Chayiv and Shemitah. Now, guys, you have to halt cup over here. Says the Gemara. First of all, what's the source for that? Maybe just like Kal Mecha excludes Hegdish, which it does for all the dinim. How do you know that a kedem of Hegdish is still bound by the dinim and by the kedusha of Shemitah? Because in Parshas Bahar it says V'shavsa ha'aretz Shabbos Lashem, and as the Penei Moshe 12 lines from the top of the Amid points out that if you open up the Chumash in the beginning of the Parsha, right, that Vayikra Peidik Chafei Pasik Beis writes V'shavsa ha'aretz Shabbos Lashem, and Pasik Dalid Vayter writes V'shavsa ha'aretz Shabbos Lashem. It's written 2 times. Now, really, the kasha that Chasidus asks is that it's mashma when you open up the Chumash, that when you enter the land, right away the Torah says first Shemitah, then the Torah says 6 years work, 7th year Shemitah. Question is, do you do the 1st year Shemitah or do you do the 7th year Shemitah? And that's why the Torah writes twice Shabbos Lashem, because the Torah writes Shemitah before the work of 6 years and Shemitah after the work of the 6 years. But the Gemara is just focusing on the fact that it says Shabbos Lashem twice. And why does it say it twice? Look inside the Gemara to teach you Davar Shehul Hashem, even something that belongs to God. What are we referring to? Someone who consecrated this entire vineyard. Nevertheless, that field is also bound by the laws of Shemitah. Kedusha Shvi is Chala Allah. Now says the Gemara, Rabbi Bar Abba asked in front of, and he asked to Rabbi Manam. Shemitah produce, right, has to be if. Okay, let me take a step back over here. When this field is both Hegdish and it's Shemitah. That's what we're saying. Shemitah produce could be eaten. Hegdish produce may never be eaten by a commoner if you don't first redeem it. Because she lehegdish lotzeis beloy pidyon. Right, so far, simple. Now comes the problem. Problem is that how can you say, okay, redeem it, when if you'll do that, nimtza, it's going to come out that you are using money that you got for the paydos of Shemitah, which may only be used for food and drink. You're using it, the example we are given is to purchase an axe, which means you're using it for your private use, and the private use here will be the mitzvah to redeem. Let me just say the following, that when a vineyard was given to Hegdish, anyone who is going to redeem it will deconsecrate it and will be allowed to use it, right? That's what happens. The Kedusha of Hegdish goes onto the money, and the item of Hegdish, we're speaking about the Rebbe Kabayis, goes out l'chulin. However, there is a special mitzvah on the owner, meaning the one who consecrated it, he has a mitzvah to redeem it. With all of the details that when the owner redeems something that he consecrated, he adds a fifth. We're not focusing on the fifth. We're focusing on the fact that there is a mitzvah. So let's go. When you will deconsecrate Peidos Shemitah, in our case, we're speaking about a vineyard. Really, there are 2 redemptions that are happening over here. You have to remove the Kedusha of Hegdish. You have to remove the Kedusha of Shemitah. So now, let's read inside the Marafulda. That money will have in it 2 Kedushas. One is the Kedushas of Hegdish, and one is the Demei Shvi'is. Shaharei Chalife Peidos Shvi'is Noisen, he's giving it to exchange it for the Kedusha of Shemitah. And we have a rule that money of Shemitah, which is called Peidos, right? That's the Isur of Schoida. Asur liknois behem, you may not use it even for a mitzvah. As the Chazal learn, lo oichla, again from this parsha, v'lo l'schoida. So what we are saying is that when you redeem it, first you remove the Kedusha of Shemitah. The same money, which is money of Shemitah, is being used to deconsecrate Hegdish. Now let it do that. then you are benefiting with this money, the mitzvah, which is the mitzvah for you, the owner, to redeem a hegdish. The havalei ki'ilu higdish mois halolu lehegdish. It's as if money is hegdish money, even a henaban. K'may shekayne kurdam adamei shvius. Nehenebe kurdam zeh shalei ala de achila. Elo shemarviach by a havalei schayram. Mamish gavaldik. So how is it done? How will it work? So Amalei responds Rav Mana to Rav Chia bar Abba that what we do is listen to what you have to do. Hagizboy machlifoy biyad ached. What has to happen is that first you have to remove the hegdish sanctity. Who does it? Not the owner who's doing the mitzvah of redeeming it. Can be that way. Now, when you are machalal this kerem on other monies to remove only the hegdish sanctity, just to know what happens over here. That sanctity goes into the money. But the produce is still Shemitah. So now the owner is allowed to go ahead and to redeem the Shemitah money with his private money that's not sanctified. And now let's read inside the Mara Fulda to see what happens with that money. Says the Mara Fulda, one line under the Gemara. First wide line. Hagizboy machlifay alidei acher. In other words, alidei atzmai loy. Meaning, the cholzman shaperis we have hagizber. When the produce is in the hands of the temple treasurer, akate hakol b'rishus hegdish kaima. V'loy nafke b'rishus el alidei acher. First of all, the gizber really cannot do it himself. Someone else has to do it. So someone else gives money. That money the gizber will take, and hagizber mechalalon al mo'ois ish achar perush kedushas shvi'is mechalal levadoi. The first step that you do is that you remove the kedusha of shmita. V'haperois u'mo'ois ha'achroinim. So the fruit and those monies. The first step is to deconsecrate it, to take away Kedusha Shemitah. Why is that the first step? Because we want to allow for the owner to fulfill his mitzvah of redeeming his hegdish. It has to remain mugdash. But you have to first remove the Kedusha Shemitah. Those monies actually, both the produce still has Kedusha Shemitah, and the monies have to be used only for that which Shemitah may be used, which is to use that money for food and drink. Our hegdish. All right. So the money that the okay, in other words, what happens first is that you remove the kedusha. Actually, first you remove the hegdish sanctity. First, you remove the hegdish sanctity.
Are they bringing a third person into this?
One second. Okay. The first step is to remove the hegdish. That's the first step. You remove the hegdish not by the owner, and the non-owner is not doing a mitzvah, simply being mechalol. Mamish. Someone has to be mechalol.
How could you?
No, the owner cannot do it, as we said.
Right, but how could a non-owner remove the hektish?
Anyone, he has no mitzvah kevan, but he can remove it. When someone consecrates any item to the Bedek Habayis, anyone who gives money for it, first of all, doesn't have to add a fifth, and it's deconsecrated, but that money belongs to Hegdish.
So you bring a third person into this. Okay.
You have to bring a third person into it. And then there's another detail. That's what the Marafulda is saying, is that when the owner goes ahead and he gives the second time money just to redeem the Kedusha of Shemitah, just to remember a rule, when it comes to Hegdish, if this is Hegdish, right, and someone, this is worth $1, and someone gives $1, this becomes Chulin. The dollar becomes Hegdish, this becomes Chulin. When you remove the sanctity of Shemitah, there's another rule, that the original item, which is here, the grapes or the vineyard, and the money that was given, they both have on it Kedusha Shemitah, just to be aware of that. So when you're machalal that kedem, the kedem is still Shemitah. The money that the Gizbar receives is also still bound with Shemitah. But what we resolved is that if the owner would be the one giving the money, since there is a mitzvah on the owner doing it, since both deconsecrations, let's say, even happen at the same time, but what's really happening is that he's being paid the hegdish with money that has in it kedusha of Shemitah. That is something you're not allowed to do. So you have to bring a third person involved over here. Wow.
Or can you just wait and come back and do it again? Instead of bringing a third person, can you just redo it? The same person come back?
The other person can still come back, yes. But then it's going to be hard to get the same person giving money twice for it.
Right.
Amazing. The nekuda is that you cannot have the owner doing the pidyon right away. You have to first get someone who doesn't have a mitzvah to only take off the hegdish sanctity. Very good. Okay. Says the Gemara. That was like a chiddush of Rav Mana. So asks the Gemara, Omar Rav Matanya, why do we need to come to this type of double redemption? V'lama leis anan amrin. Why would we not give a simpler answer? Ka'ai da Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Now Rabbi Yochanan is speaking about, like we mentioned in the intro, when you have a person that makes a vow, Reuven tells Shimon, you may not benefit anything that belongs to me. And then they both find themselves in a desert, and Reuven is the only one with food and drink. So we have a machlokes between the Chachamim. The Chachamim say, I have the solution. Put your item on a rock. Be mafkid, that item, the drink. Now it's no longer Reuven's. Shimon is not having enough from Reuven. Shimon now can drink of it. Says the Chachamim. Comes along Rabbi Yossi with this big chiddush that we spoke out, that even when you declare something hefkid only means that anyone has the right to take it. But prior to anyone taking it, it still belongs to the original owner. So Rabbi Yossi doesn't allow for that to be a solution. Okay. Comes along Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan qualifies the din of Rabbi Yossi. And what does he say? He says that divrei Rabbi Yossi, only mipnei shekadam nidroi lehefkedoi. That when you have a person that first made a neder and then he was mafked his items, there is where Rabbi Yossi says that it continues to be asur because there is a neder. What will to happen if Reuven is in the desert? Reuven puts his flask of water on a rock and he declares it ownerless. Don't forget, Rabbi Yossi holds that even though he declared it ownerless, it was not it still belongs to him until someone else takes it. And after he declares it ownerless, he makes a vow, Shimon, you may not have any benefit from it. Says that Rabbi Yochanan that even according to Rabbi Yossi, Shimon can take the water. Why can Shimon take the water? Why can Shimon take the water? Says the Marafulda, 9 lines from the bottom, like we just spoke out. I get that he puts it on the fence. Whoever wants to take it, and Rabbi Yossi asers, and then comes Rabbi Yochanan and he says, "Come with Rabbi Yossi, the pnei shekadam nidre lehefkedoi, avalom kadam lehefkedoi lenidrei muter." Why? V'hatam mefarash hasam doloi also al daltoi leeser benidrei mashehivke. Since he was already mafked his water or his food, when he then made a vow, he never had in mind to include that in the vow, even though it still belongs to him according to Rabbi Yossi. What does it have to do with here? Says the Marafulda. For Hachinami, the person who planted a vineyard and ultimately he was magdishit. Why don't we say Nama Nema? What is he talking about? That is hefker. He never had a mind to be mafkir during the Shemitah year. It's crazy. And therefore, why don't we say that Hegdish was lachatchila not chal under the 7th year? Now, don't forget, Peidosh Shvi'is, if you redeem it, if you exchange it on money, we get that. Both of them are holy. Doesn't matter. The point is that there is no issue with you redeeming it. And then we say that the owner is doing a mitzvah, and how can he do a mitzvah when he's also the Shvi'is? He was lachatchila, not magdash at the Shemitah year. Why don't we say that? In other words, we learned in a Braisa, that was the whole thing in the Amid, that even though take kerem lahegdish, patim in olam and arabiyum in oilas chayiv b'shvius. Why don't we say it's only chayiv b'shvius, but it's not hegdish on the Shemitah year? Like Rabbi Yochanan Taich the Rabbi Yossi, that if prior to making a neder, which is hegdish is a neder, you're mafkir something, that's the stretch. Shemitah, you are not mafkir it, but God was mafkir it. Your hegdish was, your neder was lachatchila not chal on that which you are mafkir. That is concluding the question on why do we need to have such a convoluted answer. Why don't we say kodam hefkedoi lehegdeshoi? Quite amazing, and that will be the way out of your kasha. How can the owner be poided? Of course, he can be poided because it's lachatchila not hegdish, and actually the Gemara gives no answer, which means the Gemara is accepting that according to Rabbi Yochanan, that's indeed what will happen. So if you're magdish, you're kedem to the Beis Hamikdash, since Shemitah year, you know already, God was mafkid all the produce. The produce is lechatchila only Shemitah produce, and it's not going to be hegdish during the Shemitah year. Okay, Mike. The next part of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah differentiated between oilers that were not even discernible prior to your declaration of Hegdish. Those will become Mugdash, and Hegdish Kedem is exempt from leaving oilers. But once the oilers were already discernible, Mishanoidu, as the Mishnah said the words, so Lakula Alma, those underdeveloped clusters, they belong to the Aniyim. We also learned in the Sugya prior to Daf Samach Vav that even though they belong to the Aniyim may never harvest their oilers until it's the time of harvest. So they're going to stay on the vine and they're going to grow. Question is, do Daniyim have to pay schar? And that was a machloikas. Tanakama, even though Tanakama did not say so explicitly, but it's understood, it's implied that Tanakama holds that the poor don't even have to give the money to Hegdish, because like we mentioned, the owner, knowing that there's oilers on the field, never had the right to be magdish, the nourishment, the future nourishment that those oilers need, because they belong to the poor. So if he was not magdish, it never belonged to Hegdish. They don't have to give the schar. Rabbi Yossi holds that they must donate the value of the new growth to the Hegdish. And Amar Rabbi Yochanan, that Maisa Hoya, there was such a story that happened, and V'hoidu, and they paskined like Rabbi Yossi, that yes, that you have to give schar of Gidulehen le Hegdish. Then the Mishnah went on, and the Mishnah spoke about the din of shikha. Now, the general rule of shikha is very straightforward. That if you pass by during your harvest, in our case, a kedem, pass by a vine, and you didn't harvest that vine, the Torah says, Lo sashuv lekachta. Now, Lo sashuv means that if you not only technically walked by it, but if you legally, meaning halachically, if you left this vine, then you apply, don't return. If you halachically did not leave it yet, then you're harvesting it is not an act of returning. How do you define that? So there are two ways. One way you can say it's the mitzias. Your back is towards it. You're facing the vine. You're taking all the grapes off, all of the eshkoilos off, the ones that you are allowed to take. Obviously, you're leaving the oilless for chulei. You moved on. The moment you moved away, a little half a step, you moved away. says the Mishnah that we differentiate. When you have an odis, that was the word of the Mishnah, trellised vines, the definition of walking away isn't only walking away, but if you are so far away, let's use the words in English, that it's beyond your arm's reach. It means if you want to go back to take it, you can't just extend your arm, you have to physically move back towards that vine. That is where you say, if it's within your arm's reach, even though you moved on, the Mishnah says, then you're allowed to take it. Masha'inkin rugliyos, which means the vines that are lesser of importance and they're laying on the ground, they are considered, we consider deer moving on, even if you just physically moved on, even if you are within arm's reach. Now, this is really linked to the topic that we had earlier on in Kol Zayis, in the 7th chapter. The whole chapter opens up by telling you that when you have a Zayis, when you have an olive tree, if there's something distinctive, special, extraordinary, the example the Mishnah began is that during the time when the olives are ready for harvest, oil is dripping out. So we already said that there is no din of shikha, and we already learned the Marafuld of the Pnei Moshe earlier on that it's not that there's no shikha, but he linked it to the sugya. Now you're going to see the link again. In other words, something that's more chashuv, you have to walk further away for you to say that there's shikha. Not that there's never shikha. Not that there's never shikha. The only case we found is that if you never even knew it's extraordinary, there we say that even if you walked far, far away outside arm's reach, now that you found out that it's special, now you can come back. But generally, it's about how far away do you have to move, and the rule will be the more distinctive, you have to walk farther away for you now to say, lo sashuv. If it's not chashuv, one little step away is already considered an act of returning. Beruchnius, when you say a yid has to do tshuva, tshuva means you turned away, you have to turn back. You didn't even turn away. Even if you turned away, you didn't turn away yet. Okay. Says the Gemara that should not our Mishnah that differentiates between the Oris and the Ragliyos, isn't that Pliga al Rabbi Yechanan? Isn't that arguing with Rabbi Yechanan? I know it's worded in the opposite way. The opposite way means that a Tana can argue with an Amoida, of course. There were no Amoidaim there. The Amoida cannot argue with a Tana. You have to touch it. Shouldn't this Mishnah be a Pliga, be in contrast, be a problem to the Shita of Rabbi Yechanan, which is Rabbi Yechanan, who was speaking, the Rabbi Yechanan statement was not about a vineyard. Rabbi Yechanan's statement was about all fruit trees, but why should they be different? Rabbi Yechanan says, that's the klal. It's shikha, even if it is within the arm's reach. Now, l'chayra, think about it, guys. Vines, when they are trellised, they are like fruit trees, right? They're not growing on the ground. So how can Rabbi Yechanan say that even if it's within arm's reach, it's considered shikha, when our Mishnah is saying that only if it's beyond arm's reach? So the Gemara says, nah, you made it the wrong comparison. Fruit trees are compared to the vine that's laying on the ground. That is the standard. Normally, the premise is, the basic law is, you took one step away, it's already considered shikha. What is unique is an aris. Shani hiba aris, since shedarkoi lifchain, a person will constantly check to see if there's any grapes left, as we mentioned, when it comes to any extraordinary tree, right? You have it in your mind. If you forgot it, it's going to come up. Even when you forgot it, it's going to order, because you always think, that vine. So the others is the exception. The rule is the rugliyos. Now, in contrast to Rabbi Yechanan, we have the Amoira Rab Hoshaya, which we'll speak out in a moment. The way we will introduce Rabbi Shaya holds that shikha always, by all trees, Mendel, it only goes into effect after it's beyond arm's reach. Now, l'chayda, it's good. The premise is l'chayda good. In other words, the kasha was that a trellis vine is like a tree. It's up in the air. Rabbi Shia says in Echanami, by all the fruit trees, shikha only means when it's beyond arm's reach. So don't think it's not a problem. The Gemara is asking. My problem from our Mishnah isn't only obviously on Rabbi Yechanan, but we gave an answer to that. But Vafilu al Rabbi Shaya, Leis he pliga, is our Mishnah not going to be a problem even on Rabbi Shaya? How will it be a problem? Rabbi Shaya Omer, That I was once shredding olives with Rabbi the Great. He was already up to the step where he's turning them into olive oil. But while they were working together, so Amali, so Rabbi told me, that kol zayis shat yochel lifshat yotcha v'lipoy ein shikram. Okay. And the problem is kol zayis. Kol zayis. Let me go in the opposite direction. Our Mishnah says that the rugliyos, if you just walk by it, it's right away shikha. What he was told, I mean, it's not his din, but he shared it in from Rabbi Gadol, that any olive tree, not only a special olive tree, that would be like the rugliyos. Shikha is always when it's beyond arm's reach. Our Mishnah gives by the vines that within arm's reach, if it's rugliyos, it is shikha. So, exactly, says the Gemara, that all trees are compared to the others, according to Rabbi Shai. All trees are compared to the others. Shana, he should call rugliyos v'rugliyos. There's something else about rugliyos. It's not only that it's considered inferior, but we are going to view every single vine laying on the ground like a complete row. Now, even Rabbi Hagadol told Rabbi Shai that by all the olive trees, even not distinctive ones, if it's within arm's reach, it's not shekha. That is regarding the trees within a row. I am harvesting within the row. Since I'm within the row, even though I walked by it, I didn't really walk away from it unless it's beyond arm's reach. But he is moided that when you move on to a new row, which means when you harvested the last one of row 3 and you move down to row 4, even if it's within your arm's reach, why is it within your arm's reach? Because you're not going from north-south. You're going up and down. So when you finish down, you give it a little turn and you begin with the one that's down up. You're going up in zigzag. So there, everyone is moida. Since you moved on to a new row, even if you are within the arm's reach, it's considered shikha. So we're going to consider the rugliyos like a new row. Guys, the bottom line will be is that according to Rabbi Yochanan, rugliyos represents the standard law of shikha. Just remember that. What's the standard law of shikha according to Rabbi Yochanan? That if you take a step away, it's called shikha. The Elama, there's a din that when you have an oris, and in the beginning of this paydik, it's mamish work, we're beginning and ending with the same topic. When you have a olive that's oozing oil, there we extend. Not that there's never shikha. That was the whole Pnei Moshe. Even though you walked away, you can go back. But if you went outside arm's reach, hasta shikha. According to Rabbi Shaya, the trellis is the standard. In other words, that's why Rabbi Shaya holds that when it comes to the vine trellis, when it comes to all trees, not distinctive, even not distinctive, shikha is only if it's outside of arm's reach. There is one exception. The one exception is when you begin a new row. Rugliyos is like beginning a new row. Uman means a row. Uman b'fnei atzmai. And on that we say, Hadran Allah, we will return to you. And God willing, a big mazel tov. And we are starting now the final chapter. Perek Shmini, we have time. Up to Daf Samach Zayin. In our pagination, we're going to conclude this Masech on Daf Ayin Gimel. So we're mamish marching towards the grand finale. Our Mishnah is going to begin speaking about Matnas Aniyim. The Mishnah will use as an example Leket, but as we'll speak out, we're speaking also about Shikha, and we're speaking also about Peya. And what did we learn in this whole Mesechta? That there's something called Matnas Aniyim. So when you harvest the field, depending on what type of field, there are many products that must be left for the Aniyim. Okay. We also learned that there are specific times when the owner who has to be present, when the Aniyim come in, but they have to know when the owner is going to be present, and they come in and they go and they remove their matanas. There is a point, that's the whole Mishnah, that once the field was thoroughly gone through by Aniyim, as to be defined, if there is anything still remaining, it will no longer be in the category of Matnas Aniyim. It will assume a category of Hefker, which means it will be mutter for anyone to take. Anyone can be the owner, anyone can be a non-ani, anyone can take it. That will be the whole mission. But we're going to apply this different in all different types of products. So in other words, the base, the given, but Rabbeinu HaKadosh took it that you know already, is that there is a point where Kol Adam will be allowed to take it. So he's asking, Me'emosai Kol Adam Mutanim B'leket. The Tosfos Yontif says that even though we're not only speaking about leket, we're speaking about leket and shikha peah. Why did the Mishnah use as an example leket? Because leket, think about it, in a grain field will be scattered all around the field. It's more shayach that an ani will miss it. Think about peah. Peah is in one part of the field. One part, even though we learned before that you can leave a little bit on the edge, you can leave in the middle, you can leave instead of it, machlokes tanoim. Normally, a person would designate one area, the 160th, or if the guy wants to give more, it's in one area. If I leave all my pay in one area, it's very practically difficult to tell me that Aniyam went there. They knew that in this square footage you have all of the payah, but they're not going to get everything that's there. They will. And I'll tell you more, even shikha that could be scattered all around the field, shikha is a nice quantity. Yeah, not more than sosayim, but it's a bundle. It's an unharvested patch, but it's a patch. It's difficult for you to tell me that an ani missed it. Leket means 1 or 2 ears fell out of the hand of the reaper. And that can be anywhere. So even where there's going to be 1 or 2. That's why the Mishnah gives an example of leket. But the emes is that if the aniyim for whatever reason missed a shtickle of the payah, or all of it, but if they missed a little bit of the shikha, there will be a point where everyone will be allowed to take it. And what is that point? So here says the Mishnah, the Moishas means elderly people. We had this word before. We're going to learn again in the Gemara's the word. How do we know it means? Elderly means a person who's walking bent with a cane. How do you define an old person? That's a good definition. Ben tishim lashuach. So what happens is, think about it, when a person is walking slowly, because he's walking with a cane, and he's bent over, so you know the Hayom Yom, what makes us special? That we can look up to the heavens, so you can miss the earth. If someone is bent over, they see the earth. So when you have aniyim that are slow walkers, and they're bent over, that means that they'll see everything. If even they went through the field and nothing was removed, what remains is l'chaladim. I do want to say that how does it become l'chol adam? There is really, it's not so pashut. Let's use now, in the beginning, we're going to use the concept, the halachic concept of yiyush. Yiyush means that, what did we learn the whole time? That the matnas anim of this mesechta was not something that the owner even has the right to determine who to get it. Right? The mitzvah, which says, was lahaniach peya, the Rambam writes. So it does. It's not that it's going to be going to a specific ani. Nevertheless, who would normally take it? Aniyah oisa ha'ir. That's how, because the aniyam knew that in the other city, by the time they'll get there, the aniyam of that city will take it. If all of the aniyam have yiyush, which we find throughout the halach, not only going to get matnas aniyam, that means that they despair of there being anything left. When the Nemoshas walk through the field, all the other aniyam, they have yiyush. And therefore, Yiyush removes their ownership over whatever is there, if anything is there. And now Ataka becomes Sepker. Let's go with Yiyush. Now, Beperet uba oileilis, when you have a vineyard, really you would say, same thing. What's the difference? The Gemara is going to ask that. But for some reason, by the vineyard, we're not using the Nemoshos as the cutoff point, but we're going to say another cutoff point. That Mishiyelchu Aniyam Bakedem V'yovoyu. Twice. In other words, when they walk through it, let's go, they go from east to west, and then they go back from west to east. When there is the back and forward movement, meaning the same concept of Yiyush. Aniyim didn't go through it once. They went through it twice. Boom. Here again, the Gemara is going to have to explain why don't we give Nemoshos, but we don't. What's the cutoff point? What's the Me'emosai? When the second rain falls, and yes, guys, I know we have a Masechtas Tainis. Not everyone is in agreement exactly when that second rainfall season is in Israel, but it's more or less by Cheshvan Kislev. And our Mishnah holds that at that point, the poor already collected all of their gifts. So it has to do not with what happened, it has to do with Zman. At that time, all of the other aniyim presume they have used that by now. It was taken already by Zaysim. Again, why don't we use that for the other ones? All of that will leave for the Gemara. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Egeya, this final Zman Shiur by Zaysim. I disagree with you. There are people that only begin to harvest the olives. They only begin after the second rain, which means, Chavra, that in those fields, the aniyim know that now is their time to go after the second rain season. You know something? Once aniyim are already going in some fields, they don't have use for the other fields. That's the nature. That's the nature. Because if imagine you're a pack of aniyim, not you, God forbid, no one should be an ani. But when you see certain fields in which there's something for the aniyim, they go to the neighboring field. That's the way Lahabdil in Vegas, they steal your money. First days, they get everyone witnesses one idiot pulling the thing and ding, 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 winning money. Everyone thinks if he's winning, I'm going to win. Once they see people removing stuff from the field, no one will give up on any field. That's why he argues. The Tanakama agrees that there are certain fields that are only harvested after the Via Shania, but this is what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Elon, another shir, which is amazing. Let's go with the word Ella or without the word Ella. Arba'a isares. Guys, removing matnas aniyim from the field demands a certain amount of work, and you give that work because you want to have a certain type of result. It's like here in the shul, we don't yet have the Mishalachim coming because there aren't yet enough neighboring shuls. That's the way it works. So for them to invest time to go to a certain place to go around collecting and davening, there is a certain minimum that they want to make. And if they can't make it in one neighborhood, they'll go to another neighborhood. Think about the same thing over here. An ani who's going to make the effort to go through a field, in the case now with Zaysim, and to get the olives that whether it's shikha, right? You don't have periton oilings. You have over here by olives the din of shikha or the din of peyah. They want to have the value of 4 isares. Now, just to know like this, 4 isares, two isares are enough to buy 1 loaf of bread. So says the Marafulda. 1 loaf of bread was food for 2 meals. Now you understand also why in halacha we speak about pras, chilas pras, because what was a meal? First of all, a meal is bread, and poor people only had bread, which was fine. How much bread would they eat? So there was a standard size of a loaf. There was a machloikas all the way to the top, whether it's 8 egg volumes in a loaf, whether it's 6. So prat, a piece of loaf, which was a meal, was either 3 volumes. Whether we just learned the Rambam says it's 3. Whether it's 4, that's a big nafkamina and halacha. But coming back over here, 2 isares was enough to buy 1 loaf of bread, which is 2 meals. 2 meals is 1 day's food. 4 isers is enough to buy basically 4 meals. Who are you getting 4 meals for? The ani and his wife. That's the logic. An ani is going to go through the field if his time will bring back food for today. What's food for today? 4 meals. So once that quantity of olives are no longer there, then the other aniyim will have yiush because it's not worth it anymore. It's different. Why would I bother? Once there's nothing left, it's not worth it, then it becomes mutarais.